everyone who's joining us today on this little adventure into doing 11 weeks to go along with the 11 chapters of the technical document. So we'll talk about that in just a minute, but I'll introduce myself first. My name's Rebecca Harrington. I am primarily the health educator at SUNY Oneonta. I've been there since 2004, and I've been on this SPARC adventure, I think since about 2015 when Joe Storch, who is part of the SUNY legal system, kind of had this idea of like maybe there's a way that we could leverage SUNY into creating our own online course. And so that was also in conjunction with some folks at SUNY Albany, and we just kind of dove into the deep end of the pool and met and talked about what we would want to include in that content. And we discussed software and what we had access to already. And it just kind of started from there. And I'm one of those people where I know I tend to volunteer for projects, and I did. And here I am in this very life-changing experience of learning some software, of taking it from like that. I wish I could have my own program because I know exactly what I want to provide to my students, and being actually able to deliver that. It was not without sleepless nights. And I'd have to say, as I've supported other folks in developing online training materials, like it does seem to be a pretty common thing now. I think sometimes instead of lead developer, I think I need to think of myself as a midwife in terms of the birthing process of these kinds of materials. But I think a lot of what I've learned along the way came from my original master's degree, which was in music industry, and it's a lot of project management content. So what I want to do over these next couple of weeks of courses is talk about weaving together your expertise and your knowledge. I want to cheerlead you through learning Articulate Storyline, because I think you are all capable of learning that software program, and then guiding you through how to utilize the strengths on your campus to actually launch this, but also recognizing that it's a project. It really is. And again, I think everybody's capable of doing this, but you know, if I can help guide you through some of the steps and break it down and make it seem a little bit more manageable, that's what I would like to do. So this week, our goal is just look at the tools that we need to get one of these projects off and running, help you identify the people on your campus that can help you, that have the unique skills that you need to do. And then the two here with the asterisks here are what I would consider more your homework to get up and running, is to review some current slide decks. And I have some links in the PowerPoint. We'll make the PowerPoint available to folks after this. And then starting with Articulate skills and take you step by step through getting through Articulate. So step one, if you're not already in the system, and I think Lisa is on standby if you haven't already signed up to get access to all the free files related to SUNY SPARC and SUNY TRAC, the longer HTTP URL that's on the slide in front of you is the long version. I believe Lisa has already copied and pasted it into the chat line. So if you want to just copy and paste it now, or if you want to use this bit.ly, that'll take you all to the same place where there's a couple of questions you fill out. SPARC was originally created with grant money, so we're still doing some data tracking. So that's why we're asking some of those questions. And then you'll get access to the technical document that you see the screenshot of here. We have lots and lots of files available for you on that site, and that's where we'll be placing the stuff from these meetings as well. So we're recording this so you can go back and watch it as many times as you want. So if you're somebody who likes to just sit and listen and take a couple of notes, you don't have to worry about copying everything down on the slides, because we'll make those available to you afterwards. And actually what I'm also going to do too is I'm going to put my email address in the chat box right now. So if you want to copy that, if anything goes awry, go ahead and send me an email and I will get you connected to what you need. So let's move on. So the tools that you need.
Interrupt real quick before you start, Rebecca. Just to remind everyone, if you have questions as Rebecca's going along, if you want to go ahead and share them in the chat, we will try to address them, either as she goes or at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them out there. And Lisa who also works up at SUNY Legal. Lisa and I were brought together, and we've got this really great friendship going now from afar because I'm at Oneana and she's based in Albany, but we've been on this adventure together of learning WebEx and and diving into all of these fun things together. So she'll be monitoring the chat too. So don't worry that you're interrupting me. Just go ahead and poke it in there and we will keep going. So the tools that you need, and I think this is the sticking point that a lot of people worry about, is the Articulate Storyline, which is a pretty heavy duty software package. I think if you're somebody who uses PowerPoint fairly regularly, there's a lot of Storyline 3 that makes a lot of good sense to you. And this is really the only cost that you will have to incur to make SPARC work for you. I know that Adobe Captivate is another e-learning software. There's no way to get the storyline content into Captivate, but you're still more than welcome to share the slides and use the content we've developed if you're a Captivate campus and you have access to support with that and you don't have this. Articulate Storyline, when you go on their website, it is actually listed at $1,400. I did check fairly recently and their educational license is still around $700. There are two versions, and Articulate really pushes Articulate Storyline 360, which is their monthly subscription-based version of software. Storyline 3 is a one-time purchase. They roll updates out to 360 on a monthly basis. Storyline 3, I think I update every couple months. They wait until they have a couple of updates and then they package it all together and you can get that going. They do offer a 30-day free trial for each. So you can jump in today if you want to download it tomorrow and start playing. You've got a month to mess around with it, and then maybe you just need to get a friend afterwards to sign up for another trial and you can keep going. But in the long run, I think for me at my campus, we went from spending $10,000 to $12,000 a year on software to buying the Storyline license once for, and when we started doing this, Articulate Storyline 2 was out, so I did have to get a Storyline 3 license. But, since taking this on, I feel like the significant cost and savings by not using a third-party vendor is it's paid for that $700 many times over. The other thing is that I'm using Storyline for a lot of different projects, which maybe once we get a little bit deeper into these weeks, I will be able to share some of the other projects I've done with it. So I think it's more than a tool for just this one problem. And you may find, I found out on my campus, and I've been working, we call it the TLTC on my campus, and it's the Learning Technology Center, where they're always exploring new software packages. And I've actually been working with them in a small role, encouraging other folks on my campus to use Articulate Storyline. So you might find that there are technology people on your campus that are already kind of sniffing around this software package and are looking for folks to explore and identify uses for it on campus. It is a really powerful tool once you have it under your belt. So I find one of the things that people really have a lot of questions about at the beginning is how does the whole system work? So this is my really super simple graphic display of what goes on. So the other tool that you're going to need to have to deploy SPARC or TRAC on your campus is a learning management system, or an LMS. And LMS is the lingo, which is why I put it in red here to remember to define that. Most campuses already have an LMS. BlackBoard, Canvas, and Moodle are the three kind of big players in the educational market. I know that there are other LMSs that cater more to nonprofit kinds of spaces. So, not knowing what you have on your own campus, what I can say is that my campus is a BlackBoard campus, and SUNY Albany, where we originally launched, was the other campus to originally launch, was a BlackBoard campus as well. But I know campuses have successfully used Canvas and Moodle at this point too. So if there are points where you have a specific question about one of those LMSs, I can likely connect you to somebody at a campus who has been successfully using that. So the LMS is the delivery tool. So if we start in the top left area where it's the create content in Storyline 3, that's where we build stuff. Like I said, it does look a lot like PowerPoint when you're putting content on slides. That part looks very similar. And then what we do is once we've created all of our slides, we convert it to something called SCORM 1.2. SCORM 1.2 you can think of as kind of like a PDF. It's a set industry standard for what a file looks like so that lots of programs can open it up. So you can create a PDF in Excel, you can create a PDF in Word, you can create a PDF in Photoshop, and when you open it up with a PDF viewer, you're going to be able to see what you exported out. So SCORM 1.2 takes all of the content that you've built in Storyline and exports it into a way that you then upload into your LMS system. So that's really, it's the translation part. And from your LMS, then you can deploy to your end user. They intersect with the content that they're viewing on their end, and then the user tracking data comes back into the LMS, and the LMS system holds that. So I have a grade book for all of my students as they're taking the SPARC and the TRAC classes online. And then I can review the completion. On my own campus, we put a hold on their account that keeps them from registering for the next semester until it's completed. I can run reports. I can email students who are not complete yet, and so I can track all of that information. So I'm managing the user experience through that. Occasionally I will get a bug and I can identify which students have witnessed and experienced that bug, and I can be in connection and communication with them. So it just kind of that's the circle of how the information goes. And I guess what I should do is I should probably start with, before even creating the storyline content, it's all the stuff that's in your head. So you're kind of the user at the very far left of that graphic display. So let's talk about who you need on your team and in terms of the planning process. Your LMS, your IT professionals. I found somebody on my campus who, like, I refer to him as my BlackBoard guru on campus. And as I was working through Articulate Storyline, and I really understood very little about how the LMS systems worked on campus at that point, but I just started asking him questions. I'm like, do you know what a SCORM 1.2 file is? And he nodded and he smiled. And I said, I have all of these things that I have to do. And a lot of what I've registered was just the fact that he nodded and smiled, and his body language seemed to understand the questions that I was asking, even though I didn't necessarily understand the questions I was asking. And then when it came time to deploy, we sat down and we made it all work. And it was a little bumpy in the beginning. And I think I've uncovered some of those like early mistake errors, and I've talked about those in the manual that you can download. So in the chapter 1 of the book, and I'm going to pause just a second and close the door to my kitchen. Apologize for that. So the way chapter 1 in the book is I'm kind of taking you through some of it right now. There are a couple of pages at the end of chapter 1 for these various folks that you're going to want to bring into your team, and it has some of the language that they need. So one of the things that I think would have really benefited me in the very beginning was to have a sample file that was already in SCORM 1.2, so I could have handed it off to my LMS folks to say, hey, can you upload this and make it work? Because it would have saved me a lot of problems. So I have made SCORM 1.2 files available on the SUNY page. So you can take those files, you can take those pages out of chapter 1, bring them over to your LMS folks. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense to you, but I would totally advise, like, if their body language is positive, you're like, all systems go. And you'll learn so much through these projects. The other folks that you need on campus that I would totally recommend having on board are your graphic design professionals. Most of the elements at this point are all ones that I've designed, because my graphic design people tend to be overburdened with so much work on campus, and I took some of those roles on myself. So you are welcome to use what I've created, and that was partly why I did create it, because it kept the copyright kind of free and clear for everyone. But it's also quite possible that you have, I think what they call it on my campus is, like, we have very specific protocols about what images look like, and somebody's already given some thought to those things. So it's possible that you've got folks that would be willing to help you modify the graphics so that they meet the branding that you already have in place as a college or as a department. Again, these are the places where you can kind of tweak and make it all of your own. So that circle with the D that you see, that's one of the buttons I use in SPARC it's a navigational button. I've also uploaded onto the main page some of the other graphics that I've created, which are just some very simple stick figure graphics. You can see my power, or not, this isn't my power and control wheel, it's my cycle of violence wheel. So a lot of the content that I've developed, go ahead and use it if it makes sense to you. Modify it if you want to modify it. It's all stuff that I have copyright ownership of, and I'm sharing it with you to use however you'd like. But again, think about what you've already got created in your area. If there are graphics that you always use with your department, you should totally use that, because I think one of the strengths of developing your own program is the fact that you can be consistent with your messaging out to students. And I think the big one are your video professionals on campus. I'm super lucky that I have two really great guys that work in our TV production studio who have been super helpful in all of this. I've learned so much from them, and a lot of the stuff I picked up along the way is also, and I think there are a few chapters that are really just dedicated to getting the video content. So their belief is that every campus in the world has a video studio. I don't know. I trust that they know what they're talking about, but I also know that you know your campus best. So, if you've got that ability to have studio space and somebody who's willing to offer their skills, or it's part of their job to help you out with those kinds of skills, I think that is certainly the easiest way to come up with video. But I think at this point in the project, when you're thinking about taking it on, like, to me, the video part is the heavy lift of this project. So identifying how you're going to get your videos is a really good first step. I think other places that make sense, or do you have faculty that teach those skills and they'd be able to help you within the coursework of their class, or help you identify students with extra skills? Something I've done in other places on campus is I'll pay a student club, because a lot of times they're having bake sales to raise money to go on trips or whatever it is that they're doing. And if you can give them $400 or $500, that's like 16 bake sales, and they get actually a resume experience. The club gets paid, so it feels ethical in terms of trading time for pay. So I think those are win-win situations. You still are not having to invest tons and tons of money. But then again, maybe you've got local video hobbyists, so I think this is a place to think about. If you are going to have to spend money, that's good to know up front. So if you have to get grant funds on campus to make this a reality for you, you can budget this in. Because I think, in my mind, these are the places where you're going to need extra support and extra help. Having some extra expertise on board from the start is going to make your life so much easier. That said, I've also been paying a local videographer friend for some lessons right now. She also found herself underemployed when, in New York State, we're calling it pause, our shelter in place period right now. And so I've been taking some video lessons, and we've been doing that. One of the comments that she made is the fact that we are getting so used to Zoom, and it's a lower quality video, that it's possible it's going to kind of reset how we think about how we visually pay attention to video. So I think as we're facing a year, or at least a summer, like, one of the things that was on my summer to-do list was to get some videos updated and redone, and I'm not going to be able to do that in the same way I had planned, but it is still possible that I can utilize students to record updated videos, but we'll just capture it with cell phones or webcams for this summer, and that's okay. That's how we'll do it, and it'll be all right. I think in terms of, there's more time to think about this, but you might already have a visual idea. And I think it's important to note those down. Like, you might have an image of, like, where are we going to record? Maybe we aren't going to record in the studio, or we are going to record in the studio, but we'll do it with a green screen and drop a background in later. Do we want to do it inside? Do we want to do it outside? Are there obvious campus landmarks that we want to do? And I think, again, those are all places, one of the things I think about a lot when I'm doing this kind of work is the psychology around in-group and out-group. So I think when we can drop hints about, this is something that the campus cares about, and these are folks on campus that came together to do all of these things, it reinforces that this is our campus, and all those little messages add up. And then the other part too is teleprompters. Studios are going to have teleprompters. I would share that a lot of what I've been posting on social media lately, I've just been putting in a Microsoft Word document as small as I think I can read it, and I shove it on my computer monitor right underneath where the webcam is, and it looks like I'm looking. So there's some really low tech ways to do teleprompter. There are also little programs that you can put on laptops and it'll make the text scroll by. So when you're talking about videos and thinking about all those things, you're never going to have to find people who memorize stuff. You can always find a way to allow people to read. Accessibility services is another office to investigate and start a working relationship with if you don't already have that relationship. Articulate Storyline has it all built in to be able to do tab order, to do closed captioning, to do all image text. So all of the tools that you're going to need to create accessible content are all there. But I'll have to say, like one of the semesters when I was working on this, I ended up in a committee meeting at the far end of campus. And one of the folks on that committee was our director of accessibility services, and his office was at the same end of campus as mine. And so those 10 minutes of walking from this kind of weekly boring committee meeting back to our offices was some of the most fruitful time, because every week I would just kind of go with one question, like, I need help me wrap my brain around this. And we would have that 10-minute chat and I was off and running. So I don't know if you're going to need tons of heavy lift from these folks, but it is good to have those people that you can go to for questions on the fly. The other thing too is that working with them, like I don't know in my position which students are using screen readers and adaptive technology, but knowing that if a student showed up in their office that they had the direct connection back to me to give me feedback if something was missing or something wasn't working properly, that was already built into place as well. And I'd be happy to report I haven't had any issues yet with students struggling with, and I think I'm officially 3 years into SPARC, so that means I've had roughly 5,000 students take it on my campus, and we have yet to struggle with an accessibility road bump. And then in terms of fleshing out your team, and these are the folks who are going to help you hopefully with content and maybe, writing content, recording content, just people that you're going to need to bounce ideas off of are your campus resource folks. And in my mind, I sit in the land of health promotion. So my campus resource folks for me are my university police, Title IX, community standards, Res Life, my gender and sexuality resource center, which is what we call it at SUNY Oneonta, health center director, counseling center director. Those were all folks that I wanted to be part of the messaging that went out, and quite a few of them were recorded in the videos that appear for students as the end users as well. And it's interesting because I'm talking today through the SPARC lens, but when we built TRAC, which is the accompanying alcohol class, I also had athletics. We had our EOP folks. We also have a program at Oneonta called CAMP, which is a college assistance migrant program. We had so many people at the table helping us kind of think through all of the conversations that we wanted to have about alcohol with students. And it was a really eye-opening experience to how the issue of alcohol infiltrates like really every crevice on campus. Everybody had conversations with students that ultimately came back to a conversation around alcohol. And so be able to bring those folks into the conversation, bringing them into video with students, has been really fabulous. And I think one of my favorite like SPARC stories at this point, I was helping at orientation move in, and they never give me like a high level task to do. My job was like to hold cars at one place and not flag them forward to the residence hall until there was a parking spot for them. So I kind of found myself, I felt like I was more like in entertainment mode and just talking with parents and, trying to get a pulse on anxieties and what could I do to help. And so this car pulls forward and this young woman, she kind of looks out the window at me and then she like dives back into the back seat. And it was like this really awkward moment. And the mother says to me, "Oh, she recognized you from the video." And I was like, "Oh, wow, like this is such an amazing opportunity that we are introducing ourselves to students before they even set foot on campus." And it was not anything I'd really thought about prior to that moment of like what an important little touch that is for so many students. And so speaking of students, I have a regular roster of interns through my office. I generally have about a dozen interns a semester. So they're always adding their touch and their ideas and their thoughts. I do a lot of wordsmithing with students. I kind of talk about what I wanted to say, and then I let them kind of have the final say on what the wording is going to be. I think it's so important that students are hearing things phrased from other students. And I do try to have students in my videos as well, especially in SPARC where we're talking about definitions of crimes. I think it's really important for them to have that peer-to-peer opportunity. And my students have so many skills. One of the things that I lost this semester when we went remote were students who were going to help me to redesign some of the graphics. So they're pretty awesome, and I'm sure you already know that. So in terms of content development, and I think this is really, I think 80% of creating a custom Spark for your campus is really it's the content development. But I also think like at the beginning of this project, like this is when you get to dream big. Like you get at this point anything you want, like anything that you want to put together for your students. And I think that's fun. It's a lot of power. I'm having a moment of like, ooh, do I have a Marvel Universe thing to say? But I don't. So, but the question is, what do you need Spark and Track to do for your campus? Now, if you go back and you look at what SUNY Albany created and what I created for my campus, they're really different products. SUNY Albany has, at that point in time, had a really long window of opportunity with students at on-campus orientation. I did not. I tend to have a 45-minute window in orientation, and my students are kind of back to back through 45-minute sessions for 8 or 9 hours. And so I did not want to handle the big heavy stuff in those moments because I'm also doing it in large lecture halls, and I'm cognizant of the fact that I don't want to put somebody into a stressful, triggered experience in the midst of a bunch of strangers. So for me, being able to handle all the mandatory content through the online administration and then bring people back together and be able to talk about some of the larger stuff, like we do a consent activity in that moment. We talk a little bit about alcohol, and I'm happy to share my orientation program with you as well. It's called Sex and Pizza. It's one of my favorite programs to do with students, but we use pizza as an analogy for all of our big topics. So for me, it was a place that I needed to be able to push out mandated content. In New York State, we are audited by the Department of Health, not knowing what states you all represent today. I'm not sure what your unique individual state things are, but for me, that made that easier. That's a heavy lift. Like I can draw those reports. I have an Excel spreadsheet I can download from the gradebook every semester, and I have all of those pieces of information that I need for that. So it solves like a big, like administrative kind of. So, and for me also with Spark Track, it was important to put myself in there because I want to be part of all of the things that students are getting in that launch. We follow up with a bunch of stuff in those first couple of weeks. So a student would, in theory, we usually release Spark and Track on the first Monday in August. I'm a 10-month person, so usually by saying the first Monday in August, I've had 1 or 2 days back in the office to kind of get my feet under me, and we're off and running with the semester. So they've had that content, and then they come and see me at orientation. And then I have interns and other students out doing programs out in the residence halls right away that are reinforcing those conversational points. And then by October, then we're doing Domestic Violence Awareness Month stuff. And so we're building, 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 building. So I know we talk about, in this like the spiral theory of learning. I kind of think of it as breadcrumb education, is like we're Hansel and Gretel. I'm putting those breadcrumbs out and building that path, and building also the idea that I'm a trustworthy source for students to come to for content, that my students are a trustworthy source for more information, and that really at the end of the day, I want them to feel comfortable finding the resources on campus and having, like I said, that intrinsic trust that we are people who tell the truth, that we want to be there to help them. So I think what are the unique parts of your campus resources? And I think this is one of the great things, again, about building your own, is you can put all of those things in there that you want to do. So I'm going to give you access to what the SUNY Oneana versions look like in fall 2019 and spring 2020. I will note that TRAC is the name that SUNY uses for the alcohol course. On my own campus, we call it Party Science. So just to let you know that you'll see some slightly different branding, and totally if you have a name that makes better sense for you, that you think is going to read better for your students, again, I trust you as your campus expert to figure out how to make that happen. But, think about what's on your wish list. Like I don't know, I'm a Post-it person. I live the language of Post-it notes. And so my office, like that was one of the hard things to walk away from my office, is like my wall of Post-it ideas. But, if you're keeping track of those things, or there's a journal article that's really impactful, or there's, theories that really drive your practice, like you can bring all of that into these things. So again, points available. I also created bit.lys because I knew they're a little bit easier to jot down into a notebook as we're talking about stuff. So there are older versions of SUNY SPARC and SUNY TRAC on the page that Lisa has given you all access to today through filling out that form and getting the password. So there's a version there, but there's also these other versions. So if you want to see I'm constantly tweaking. Every year there's one or two slides. I'm like, I don't like that so much. I want to change this, or a state law has changed. When we first did the alcohol class, it was a very reading heavy program, just because I didn't have the time to get into the studio to video as much as I would have liked to. And the students were pretty clear in their feedback that it was too much reading. And so I changed a lot of it to video. And then this year they came back saying it's too much video. So I'm going to have to go back this year and figure out try a different balance of content is. But I brought in a lot more different folks from across campus to participate in that. So in the book, what I've created is this appendix, and there's kind of like a little screenshot here in front of you. So it's every slide, what the title of that slide is, and basically what I think the content summary is. And so I would suggest as a really good first step is go through one of the modules that we've created, and you can go through and take a look and just, give it your own opinion. Like this is good content. This is not anything like I would ever want to use. So, is this a keeper slide? Is this a discard slide? If there's revisions, how much? Is it just minor? Is just some text editing that you would need to make it work for you? Or is there going to be a major overhaul necessary to make it work for you? So just a place to jot those ideas out. I don't know if it's something that, I'm the kind of person where I tend to be a flip brain, where I'm like a little bit here and a little bit there. And I find that these kinds of tasks take a lot of brain energy. So maybe you want to come back and visit it a couple times and just, do a couple of slides here and there. But I think that's a really great place to start. You might find that you hate all of it, or you want to totally disassemble it and put it all together in a different way. Again, I trust you to be the expert for what's going to work best for your campus and what fits into what already you're doing on your own campus. So I want to talk a little bit about downloading the software. Like I said at the beginning, you get a 30-day license. And then if you make that decision to go ahead and purchase Storyline, what they do is they basically just give you a code. And when you launch the program, there's a place where you can put in the code. So you basically get the whole program for free for 30 days. And you're good to roll. Now, Storyline uses a .story as their file type. So once you get the free version on your computer, you can download one of those ones from the SPARC website and open it up. And we're going to start looking at what Storyline looks like a little bit more next week. What I did want to mention here, and I have Google tab. Lisa, can you confirm that you see my Google page?
Yes, I do.
All right, awesome. So Articulate Storyline Articulate is really pushing 360. And if you go right to their website, you tend to just only see the 360 stuff. So my advice is go to a search engine and specifically put Articulate Storyline 3 so that you can get right to the page. See, and even this, they want to give me the 360. So let's see if they must have realized that I keep doing the same Google because I want to make sure it worked. Let's try this one. So this one I can see definitely does say Storyline 3. So here we go. So I don't know if anybody wants to jot down articulate.com /p/storyline -3. But you can click that try for free. They're going to ask you for an email and they will let you download it as a zip file. It won't take too long. And you can get that installed on your computer. And then let's see. This is what Storyline looks like. And so browse for more. This is an interesting, different kind of a place, I think. So it's in this down lower left area. So once you have a .story file on your computer, you can go looking for it. This is my most recent one. We're just going to open it quick. And my advice is if you get Storyline, you know, when you get it downloaded, get a sample file downloaded. I think this is taking a moment because it's actually saved on a cloud file. There we go. And they do tend to be pretty big files by the time they're finished. I guess I'm learning my lesson. I should have downloaded it earlier. There we go.
Rebecca, I was just going to say, as we wait, just a reminder that in order to access the password protected site that shows all the different the samples and everything that we have out there, we do have to first complete the Google form. It's a few short answers just to identify and how to reach you and who you're affiliated with. It's very easy, simple questions that we have to capture. And that will then prompt another email that will send you the password that you need to access those. So unfortunately, it's 2 steps, but as you mentioned, we had a grant, so we do have to do some tracking. So, okay, I'll let you back at it.
We know to be watching today because we knew we'd have probably a few more people doing that. So this is a lot of what Articulate looks like once you get going. So really the biggest difference here is there's something called story view. So I kind of get the overarching schematic of what it looks like on the back end. I used to have more branching navigation, but I found that was confusing my students, and it, you know, times 1900 students, it eliminated enough emails that it made sense to take out some of the branching. But what I can do is I can go from story view and I can, let's see, I'm going to find, I'll sacrifice my own self here. So here's a slide. I don't know how screenshots are made. I feel like there's an algorithm out there to find like the worst possible like freeze moment, and that's how they choose a screenshot. But if you'll notice up here on the top, like don't worry so much about these other parts, but if I come up here to the insert tab, we have a ribbon that looks very much a lot like PowerPoint. So a lot of how you add content onto slides, like I said, if you're a PowerPoint user, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you can take on pretty quickly. And so over the next couple of weeks, we'll spend less time talking nuts and bolts and more time in Articulate Storyline and just kind of give you a couple of skills at a time to keep you moving along. In my head, when I put together the technical manual, I was thinking 11 months was an up and running amount of time. So I think doing one of these every week is going to be I don't doubt that there's somebody out there who's totally capable of making this all happen in 11 weeks. And if you're told that you have to make it happen in 11 weeks, it's amazing what you can do. But, you know, that's why we're gonna record these so you can come back and take a look later. So when you're ready to tackle the next piece of content, it'll be there for you. And let's see. And I guess that's it. There's my little animal to remind me to stop talking and see if there's any questions, things that we can do to help you. Like I said, I think I don't know. I think personally, like, and I'm a software geek. When I was a single person, I would like learn a software program every winter because I was single in a cold area of the world where I didn't want to go out at night. So I feel like that was one of the the skills that I brought to this was just kind of like a love of learning software, but I've used this in so many different ways. We created an interactive bingo board. I worked with my sustainability coordinator this April because Earth Day falls during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So she too lost all of her planned activities. So we built an interactive bingo board together that we could deploy out to students. I've used it to create content to go out with shorter awareness related events. We do a lot of events that are t-shirt driven where we distribute shirts to students. And I've always pushed out postcards for those events. But then a couple years ago, I had an intern who was legally blind, and it really got me thinking about how I do my promotional efforts, that so much of what I've created, those students miss out on. Like, they can get the shirt, but they don't get the visual appeal, or they don't get to see, like, what I find when we have students wearing similar shirts is there's this in-group, out-group thing that happens, and students feel connected over a shared purpose. And so students were missing out on that. So we were able to create a very simple piece of content that could go out. That one of the other things you can do with Articulate Storyline is that you can export something into an HTML format. So you end up with something that can look very much like an app. So we've been using it in ways so to support those smaller, week-long initiative pushes, that we can push out content that educates with maybe 10 to 12 slides. I can have students help me develop the content that goes out. I push it all together. We can send it out. As you get more into it, you can do some stuff with variables and additions. So I've worked with nutrition students. We have a little protein calculator, and it's just a single slide. But what we found is they wanted to go out and do some education around protein, but all the protein calculators were on websites that were very heavily laden with ads, and they weren't necessarily ads that my dietetic students wanted other students to see. So you can do these very simple projects that add some sparkle to what you do. And I think as I'm considering what an entire fall semester online might look like, knowing that that's a possibility, thinking about how do I take my tabletop interactive events and put them into a more virtual environment through this piece of software. So I do think it is totally worthy of taking the time to learn, because I think there's a lot of applications that, SPARC was definitely starting at the heavy end of projects with this kind of a software program, but sometimes maybe that's good. You learn all the hard stuff first, and then you can kind of come back and break it down and be like, oh, with this, with just buttons, you can do stuff.
Rebecca, I'll go ahead and I'll unmute the participants, and that way if anyone...
It doesn't need to charge. You just got to keep it closer.
You're unmuted, and if you have questions, feel free. Have anything they'd like to ask?
Maybe we should do the opposite, Lisa, and keep everybody muted and give them permission to unmute.
Okay.
There we go. But if you want to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat box, tell me your fears and your worries. And thank you for that comment. That feels really good. So each week we're going to cover a different topic. So the idea is thinking through the project management part of this, of really getting you up and running with a SPARC you can use on your campus. So this, to me, like this week of thinking through, these are all the people that you want to have contact with on your campus at kind of the front end, so that you're not overloading them at the end with all of the questions, which is what I feel like I did. So I tried to take in that technical document, I really tried to take a lot of my lessons learned and go back and be like, all right, if knowing what I know now, how would I have laid out that project? And also thinking through the fact that you already all have full-time jobs, and this just is one more thing. And I know we're all amazing folks, and I think of all the time, it's like, oh, I can juggle 8 balls, surely I can juggle 9. And then you're juggling that 9th ball and you're like, well, surely I can juggle 10. And then at some point it just all does collapse. So the technical document is on the page that you're going to request information from. Let me go back and pull up the the bit.ly/SUNY Spark, or you can click that Google. That will get you to the Google form that Lisa put in at the top of the chat window. You fill out those couple questions, and then you'll get sent an email with a password, and then you can get into that password protected space, the technical documents there. There's a couple of tabs on that window when you finally get to the content area. I think the technical document shows up on the one that defaults at the beginning, and then you can kind of go back and look at some of the other content again. If you have, I don't think we've changed the password in a while. So if you've requested it within the last probably 6 to 8 months, you probably do have a current password. And if you can't get your hands,
I can check and see also. Let me see.
but I know sometimes I feel like I'm always constantly emailing Lisa. I'm like, Lisa, I lost the password, email again, give it to me. So, so she can.
I found you, Adrienne, and I'll resend it right now.
So each week, I think in my mind, I try to organize. I think the other thing too with coming up with 11 chapters was thinking like, this is what I thought you could feasibly do in a month, based on what I feel like we mostly do in an academic year. So like if you started in September and you just knocked out one a month, I just feel, so we'll be doing this every Tuesday at 3:00. So we'll just go straight through. I don't know, wherever that gets us in July. I'm like pulling up my calendar. I'm like, is July 4th on a Tuesday? So it's not. So maybe we'll do some adaptation as we get a little bit deeper. But for right now, we're going to do Tuesdays at 3:00. We'll record all of them. So if you miss one, it'll probably be a little bit of a lag getting them out to you. My intention is to get them closed captioned so that we can make sure that we have all that access. This is the first one. So week one is really just kind of getting all of your parts gathered. So find your folks, make those contacts, review a SPARC, review a TRAC, or like I said, if you look at the one that I created for my campus, I call it Party Science. Let's see where I have those bit.lys. So those are those ones. There's also sample versions on the SUNY SPARC page, the password protected page. And those ones are actually things that I did export to HTML, and that's why everybody can take a look at them. So that there's less tracking when you put stuff into HTML. But at the same time, because of that HTML tool in Storyline, like you can create like really interactive, fun stuff to put on your website, and you don't have to get your web people people are like, oh my gosh, how'd you create that thing for your website? I'm like, oh, I have some secrets. There's some, like I said, there's some fun stuff you can do, and I'll plan on having some links to share with you all next time, so you can kind of see what else is available, or maybe you realize that you just need to start with a smaller project. Some of the lessons learned along the way is like you'll be able to go in and you can review all the content as one larger piece. When I put stuff into my LMS, I actually break it down into separate modules. So students complete module 1, and then upon completion of module 1, they get access to module 2. And I did that purposely in case there were any errors or problems with coding, or technology glitches happen. So I didn't want a student to get 30 minutes into a program and then potentially have a chance of having to start over again. So that was what, I've never had a thing where I've had to do, I've never had to ask a student to repeat more than 5 minutes of content. Yes, so I guess I did miss, Adrienne, thanks for pointing me back to that question. So there's a couple things that you can do with this. You can control when the next button appears. Let me pull, those are good questions. So this timeline down here, every object in Articulate has a corresponding thing in the timeline. So if I click that video, here's the video element, and then I have this next button element, and you'll notice that the next button doesn't show up until about second 26. So they can't get to the next slide until that whole video has played out. Or one of the things that I did in some of my navigational choices, let me see if I have here. I have some that are, let's see. This is a very simple slide, but it's like in New York State, we use confidential resource and a with privacy resource. So privacy resources are pretty much everybody. The confidential resources in New York State are people with licensure, so health services. And so this slide is set up that we need to get them to answer it correctly. And what I have is that if they answer it wrong, they're prompted to try it again, because I didn't want quiz questions to be able to be skipped through. Like, they need to know this stuff. And so I've designed, you'll see that in the design as you go through. So when they get it correct, that's when they actually get the next button to get to the next slide. So there's some navigational things within the modules that are that way. In BlackBoard, there's something called adaptive release. And so what I have it set up to do, and this is really a nuts and bolts thing, and I think this is in one of the later chapters. So once you have the technical document, you can kind of skip ahead to that LMS stuff. They will, when they sign in for the first time, they get kind of like a read me first for directions from me. And then they get access to TRAC Module 1 and SPARC Module 1, and they can choose where they want to start. One of the things I have pretty early in SPARC is a trigger warning page. So we do let them know that if, what's about to come, and if they would like a different way of meeting the requirement, they can reach out to my office. And I've had a couple of students reach out over the years, and that's totally fine. We meet with them and just have a more emotionally connected conversation about the information that we have to support them as students. So they go through that. The code comes back when they get to the last slide. The code comes back to the LMS program that it's complete, and then the next module is made to appear at that point. I think one of the things we learned the hard way, and this, I've never been able to totally get students to pay, I feel like I'm still smithing through this, because what ends up happening is that by the time everything's unlocked and they're accessing the last couple modules, they have to scroll down in the content page of the LMS. And sometimes they don't think to do that. They don't see anything new on their original screen, and we have to encourage them to scroll down. So, I mean, we have some interesting emails with students about that. But what we've started doing, and I do have quizzes. I took kind of my, my post quizzes and just built them directly into the LMS, because there's some more tracking abilities built within the LMS. So you can kind of look at like, how do questions stack up against each other. And I wanted that because you can build a quiz and articulate, but it's only going to be able to export one variable. So basically it was just going to export a pass fail. And I wanted to be able to drill down to what the good questions were and what the bad questions were. So what they're presented with is that, and we put it all in one place together. So it's called the Party Science and SPARC course, and there are 10 parts. And so I do give them the alcohol content first. And so it's like alcohol module 1, alcohol module 2, but then in parentheses after each of those things, we say part 1 of 10 and all the way through. So there's 5 parts that are 4 alcohol modules and a quiz, 5 sexual violence modules and a quiz. And so they're all numbered, and that has definitely helped. So I feel like every year we come up with one new trick. I think the next thing that we really want to do, my administrative assistant and I, is keep a website going of the dates of when emails are sent out to students, just because we occasionally get, parents who are upset of like, why didn't you tell us about this? And we'd be like, well, here's the schedule of all the emails that got sent to your students. I think there are those places, and I'm not sure how Canvas and Moodle work in terms of recording emails sent to students. So any email I send through the BlackBoard system, I don't get a return email. Like, I get a copy of the email that gets sent out because I'm the course instructor, but I don't have anything in my sent email box. Like, there's no kind of receipt for that. So as we get closer to holds going on, I will download a gradebook Excel spreadsheet, and I'll mail email mail merge out to students through that, because then I do have a date. And when I have a student who is like, nobody told me about this, I can be like, I'm forwarding you a copy of the email that I sent on February 27th. So I have some of those track record kinds of things. So like I said, I think a lot of that stuff is all in the manual. So like you said, all the lessons learned that I've picked up of 3 years doing this are there. And I'm guessing at this point with 4,000 to 5,000 students through this, I've seen most of the possibilities that are going to come through. I wouldn't be surprised if I get a few new ones. Like one of the things I'll be doing over the next couple of weeks is I'm just going to change out the slide backgrounds, because I have had students send me screenshots from other semesters trying to like say, hey, like, I don't know what's going on, but I did this. See, here's my complete slide. And I can be like, oh, that's so interesting. Like that's the complete slide from the spring 2018 version of the course, and you're not enrolled in that one. And, and then they eventually do the program. So
Rebecca, I just want to hop in quick because I'm not sure if WebEx will kick us off at 4, but just to give people a last opportunity to pick your brain while they can, or
sure.
Feel free to send emails or comments or anything.
Well, and I want to be mindful of time too. So thanks, Lisa, for keeping me in line.
I've sent out to a couple of people the emails. That's why I missed Kelsey's question. I'm sorry. I was sending out the emails that provided the passwords. So hopefully if you requested it, hopefully you've received it. And there's no obligation if you do that. Just, feel free to sign up and take a look. And if you don't want to, proceed with SPARC, you don't have to. You can just take it, look at it, see what you think. And, we're doing this to try to make everyone's life easy and reach all the students we can.
Yep.
So, all right. I don't know if you want to.
No, I think that sounds good. So please feel free to join us. The same link, I believe, Lisa, for next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So bookmark that email.
Yep.
And
okay.
Next week we'll do chapter 2. And I can't wait to hear if you've had any fun adventures this week.
All right. Thank you all, and hope to see you on here next Tuesday.
Yep. Invite your friends. All right, folks, have a great week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. And if you hit any stumbling blocks, send Lisa or I an email, and we'll help you out as best as we can to keep you moving forward.
And I didn't put mine on there. It's lisa.campo, C-A-M-P-O, @suny.edu. But odds are I'll direct you to Rebecca because she's the one that really knows her stuff. But I'm happy to help. Have a great day, all.